Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, I invite you to step softly into the warm glow of the wizarding world, where candlelight dances across ancient stone, and in every shadow seems to hold a whisper of a long forgotten tale. The story I have for you is one that few at Hogwarts still remember, a mystery tucked away like a pressed flower in the pages of the castle's history. They call it the Night of the Vanishing Students, but its details have been blurred by time and softened into legend. Tonight, we will walk through those corridors together, slowly and quietly, and see what remains. The night begins in the heart of the castle, under a sky brushed with velvet and scattered with stars. Outside, the black lake lies still, reflecting the moon in silver ripples, while the gentle rustle of the forbidden forest sighs at the edge of the grounds. Inside, the common rooms are cozy havens. Fireplaces hum softly, pages of books turn with a faint crackle, and the smell of parchment mingles with the faint scent of wood smoke. It is a night like many others, or so it seems. The kind of night that makes one feel safe, as though nothing could disturb the harmony within these walls. Our story begins here, in these quiet moments when the castle rests and students drift off to sleep. We will travel together through its hallways, past the moving staircases that shift with a mind of their own, past portraits that drowsily greet us with murmured words. The air is cool, but not unkind, and every step feels cushioned by the centuries of magic that live in the very stones beneath our feet. I won't tell you everything at once, of course. That would be like opening all the doors in the castle at the same time. Too much light, too quickly, would spoil the gentle magic of discovery. Instead, we will wander slowly, letting the castle itself guide us as we uncover the first traces of a mystery that was nearly lost to time. If you enjoy journeys like this, gentle adventures filled with magic, wonder, and a touch of the unknown, then perhaps you might like to linger a while with us, to follow other tales hidden in these walls. But for now, simply listen and let the quiet of the castle wrap around you like a warm blanket. For the night is young, the candles are still burning low, and the story is only just beginning. In the softly lit corridors of Hogwarts, where every footstep seems to echo through layers of history, we begin to meet those who will walk with us through this quiet mystery. Each one is an important thread in the fabric of our tale, and like the old portraits lining the walls, they each hold stories of their own. First, there is Hermione Granger, her hair as wild as her hunger for knowledge. Tonight, even in the low light of the library, her eyes gleam with the kind of focus only she can summon. A thick tome rests open before her, its spine so ancient it looks as though it might crumble at a careless touch. She is careful, of course. Hermione has always been careful, but the flicker of curiosity on her face is almost mischievous tonight. It is as if she knows there's more to be found here than any ordinary student would dare to seek. Beside her sits Harry Potter, his lightning-shaped scar hidden beneath the fall of his fringe, his posture relaxed, but his eyes scanning the shadows. Harry has never quite trusted the quiet, especially not in Hogwarts. His presence tonight is not for study alone. It is protective, watchful. He can sense the subtle weight in the air, that whispering stillness that means the castle is keeping secrets. Across the table, Ron Weasley fights to stay awake. His chin rests on one hand, while the other hovers near a plate of half-finished biscuits, contraband from the kitchen, no doubt. Every so often, he glances at Hermione's book, then at Harry, and finally back toward the door, as if waiting for something or someone. Ron doesn't like the way the shadows in the library seem longer than they should be tonight. Still, he stays. Loyalty runs deeper in him than even he realizes. And then there is nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor house ghost, drifting at the edge of sight. His pale glow gives away his presence, but his expression is harder to read, half curious, half uneasy. Ghosts in Hogwarts are not often nervous. They've seen far too much to be easily rattled. Yet tonight, Nick lingers, as though drawn towards something even he cannot name. Around them, the library breathes softly, the turn of a page, the faint scrape of a chair leg, the sigh of dust stirred by unseen movement. Somewhere beyond the shelves, a colder draft seems to curl into the room, unnoticed for now. These are the ones who will lead us deeper into the mystery, each carrying their own strengths and flaws. Together, they make a curious mix: scholarship and instinct, bravery and caution, the living and the spectral. In their company, we will begin to uncover the threads that lead into the heart of Hogwarts' most hidden places. The hour is late, the castle quiet, and yet something is about to stir. The library was cloaked in the kind of silence that didn't feel entirely natural, too complete, too intent, as though it were listening. Hermione's quill hovered over her parchment, mid-word, when she felt it, a subtle shift in the air. It wasn't a draft exactly, but a ripple, like the library itself had inhaled. "Did you hear that?" Harry asked quietly, though the question seemed more to himself than anyone else. Ron looked up from his biscuits. "Hear what?" "I didn't..." He stopped mid-sentence, biscuit frozen halfway to his mouth, eyes narrowing toward the far aisle of shelves. The faint sound came again. This time, all three of them heard it. A slow, deliberate click, like the turning of a lock, though the restricted section's gate stood in plain view, unmoving. Nearly headless Nick floated closer, his ghostly form flickering faintly. "That," he murmured, his voice like a breeze through old curtains, "isn't a sound you want to hear after midnight." Hermione frowned. It came from beyond the stacks. She rose, gathering her robes close, the hem brushing over the cold stone floor. Harry followed immediately, wand in hand, but lowered, while Ron trailed behind, muttering about how this was the exact kind of thing that led to trouble. As they stepped into the narrower aisle, the light seemed to dim. The familiar warm glow of the floating lamps faltered as if something unseen had passed between them. On the far side of the aisle stood the wrought iron gate of the restricted section, its ancient metal twisted into curling patterns like thorned vines. But now, just barely visible, an almost imperceptible shimmer wavered across it, like heat above a fire. Hermione's eyes widened. "That's not normally there." Harry moved closer. "What is it?" Before Hermione could answer, the shimmer deepened into something more solid. The air within the gate began to cloud, swirling with pale silver shapes. At first, they looked like wisps of dust caught in a current, but then faces began to form, ghostly, half real, their eyes glinting with something sharp. One of them spoke, the voice dry and brittle, as though it had not been used in centuries. "Who seeks what must not be known?" Ron stumbled back. Blimey, did that just... Hermione held up a hand for silence, her mind racing. Ghosts were nothing new in Hogwarts, but these were different. They weren't translucent in the usual way. Their forms were threaded with lines of glowing script, letters in languages she couldn't immediately identify, curling across their spectral shapes. Nearly headless Nick looked deeply unsettled. "They are the keepers," he said quietly. "Older than my death by far. They guard the knowledge that even the headmasters tread lightly around the lead ghost, drifted forward, stopping just beyond the gate. Its eyes, though colorless, seemed to pierce each of them in turn. "You are not permitted," it said, but not in a tone of anger, more a statement of inevitability. Hermione found her voice. "We're only here to study." The ghost tilted its head, almost amused. "All study leads somewhere. The question is, will you like where it leads?" The shimmering barrier pulsed once, faintly. A wave of cold swept out from it, chilling their skin even through their robes. Harry instinctively stepped in front of Ron and Hermione, though he knew instinct alone would do little here. So, without warning, the ghost's tone shifted. "But perhaps you have cause." "Tell us your purpose, Seeker." Hermione exchanged a glance with Harry. This wasn't the outright denial she'd expected. But before she could answer, the second keeper floated forward. Its voice was softer, but layered, as though several people spoke in unison. "Beware, for the books beyond are not merely ink and paper. They are alive in ways you cannot yet comprehend." From somewhere deeper in the restricted section came a sound, faint but distinct, the rustle of pages, yet there was no breeze. Ron whispered, "Tell me that's not the books moving by themselves." "Some of them do," Hermione admitted under her breath, "but that..." She trailed off, eyes fixed on the movement behind the shimmering gate. Through the silver mist, shapes shifted on the shelves. One book, a large blackened tome, bound with what looked unsettlingly like scaled hide, lifted from its place, hovering as though unseen hands cradled it. Slowly, it turned toward them, the pages riffling with increasing speed. Words in dark ink blurred into symbols, then into moving images, twisting and reshaping themselves. The lead ghost's voice grew sharper. "This is the consequence of intrusion. Some knowledge, once awakened, will not sleep again." The shimmering barrier flared brighter, as if the keepers were reinforcing it, but with the flare came another sound, a low, almost hungry whisper, curling through the aisles. Harry felt it more than heard it, a pressure against the edges of his thoughts. Hermione took an involuntary step forward, eyes locked on the blackened tome. Her lips moved faintly, as if reading words only she could see. "Hermione," Harry said, his tone warning. He reached for her arm, but the moment his hand brushed her sleeve, the shimmering barrier rippled violently. The keeper's forms wavered, as though the disturbance passed through them. The second ghost's layered voice rose sharply. "Do not touch the Seeker." "She is being weighed." Ron's eyes darted between them. Weighed for what? The answer came not from the keepers, but from the blackened book itself. A deep, resonant thud echoed in the library, followed by a voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "For worthiness." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Hermione blinked, breaking whatever had momentarily held her. She looked at Harry, confusion etched across her face. The lead keeper drifted back toward the gate. "Leave now, while the choice remains yours." For a long moment, no one moved. The blackened tome had stilled, but its pages remained open, showing a single image, an intricate sigil, its lines glowing faintly. Hermione's mind raced. She had seen fragments of that design before, in passing references buried in unrelated texts. It was tied to something ancient, something dangerous, but the barrier between them and the restricted section was solid again. The shimmer steadied, the keepers immovable. Harry stepped back first, lowering his wand. Ron followed quickly, clearly relieved to be putting distance between himself and whatever that had been. Hermione lingered a heartbeat longer, her gaze fixed on that sigil, committing every detail to memory before she turned away. As they retreated toward the table, where their books still lay open, nearly headless Nick floated alongside, speaking in a voice pitched low so only they could hear. "You've caught their attention. Now." The keepers do not forget faces or intentions. None of them spoke again until they had left the library entirely, the echo of that cold whisper still clinging to them. The castle seemed different now, its familiar halls carrying an undercurrent of something older, deeper. Whatever had just happened, it was only the beginning. Under the moon's quiet gaze, Hogwarts had settled once more into its rhythmic breaths of stillness. The earlier stirrings in the library, the echo of footsteps no one had taken credit for, the faint whisper that had made Hermione's quill pause mid-sentence, had left an unspoken question lingering in the air. Yet, in that uniquely Hogwarts way, the castle itself seemed to draw the trio onward, as though the mystery was not meant to be solved in haste. The second unusual occurrence began, as so many things did, with a sound. It was not loud enough to startle, nor sharp enough to alarm, just a soft rustling, like fabric brushing over stone, drifting along the corridor that led toward the east wing. Harry paused mid-step, tilting his head, his eyes narrowing as he tried to place it. Ron, walking beside him, looked around uncertainly. "Tell me you heard that too," Harry murmured. "Yeah," Ron replied, voice hushed. "It's like someone's just ahead of us, but..." He trailed off, glancing at Hermione, who was already pulling her wand from her robes with measured calm. Lumos. The pale light from her wand tip didn't so much cut through the shadows as it coaxed them back, revealing the curling edges of tapestries and the gleam of suits of armor that stood sentinel in their alcoves. Dust motes swirled lazily in the air, catching the light like faint sparks. The sound came again, this time joined by something far more distinct. The scent of old parchment, dry and faintly sweet, carried on a breeze that should not have existed in the enclosed corridor. Hermione's brow furrowed. "That's the smell from the restricted section," she whispered. The corridor seemed longer than it had any right to be. Harry, who had walked it dozens of times before, felt a subtle shift underfoot, as though the stones themselves were stretching, adjusting, guiding. With each step, the air grew cooler, and the glow from their wands seemed less eager to illuminate more than a few feet ahead. When they finally turned a corner, they found themselves facing an arched doorway that none of them could recall seeing before. The frame was carved from dark wood, its surface etched with swirling runes that shimmered faintly, like moonlight caught on water. No door barred their way, only a curtain of translucent mist that swayed without any visible breeze. Ron swallowed. "We've never been here before, right?" Hermione didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the runes, her lips moving silently as she traced them in the air. "They're protective," she said at last, "but not to keep us out, more like they're keeping something in." The castle's hush settled deep around them, as if the stones themselves had grown intent on listening. Harry tucked the shimmering page carefully inside his robes, feeling its strange, weightless texture through the fabric, while Hermione and Ron exchanged looks that were half curiosity, half caution. No one spoke at first. Words felt too loud here, like tossing a pebble into a still pond and waiting for the ripples to reach some unseen shore. They turned away from the mist-veiled doorway, expecting the familiar East Wing corridor, but the castle had shifted again. The walls were the same warm stone, but the light had dimmed to a honeyed amber cast by torches that hadn't been there before. The air felt warmer, scented faintly with beeswax and something sharper, like herbs drying in a distant room. Harry knew this sensation well. It was the castle deciding to lead them somewhere. "Where do you think it's taking us now?" Ron muttered, his voice low enough to blend with the torch crackles. "Not us," Hermione replied softly. "Harry, it's guiding him. We're just allowed to follow." The corridor wound gently left, then right, then opened onto a landing that overlooked the grand staircase. Below, a slow cascade of shifting steps moved of their own accord, each landing illuminated just enough to show the way. Harry's hand brushed the banister as they descended, its surface smooth from centuries of students' hands. Yet tonight, it hummed faintly under his touch, as though the wood itself remembered every journey it had carried. They followed the stairs down 3 floors, the echo of their footfalls swallowed almost instantly, until the steps delivered them to a corridor Harry rarely visited. The air here was cooler again, tinged with the scent of water and stone, the smell of the castle's older, deeper places. They walked in quiet, their wands casting overlapping halos of light, until they reached an archway so low that Harry had to duck to pass beneath it. The space beyond was small and circular, its walls lined with shelves stacked haphazardly with old brass instruments, telescopes, astrolabes, devices whose purposes they could only guess at. A single desk stood in the middle, its surface layered with rolls of parchment and tiny crystal bottles sealed with wax. and there, resting on a velvet cloth, lay something that made Hermione's breath catch. A small, palm-sized orb of clear glass, glowing faintly from within. The light was not steady, but pulsed gently, like the rhythm of a calm heartbeat. "What is it?" Ron asked, though he didn't step closer. Hermione moved toward it, her wand lowered, the light catching in her hair. "It's old," she murmured. "Older than the castle, I think. The runes etched into it." She leaned down, tracing a finger above its surface without touching. "They're the same as the ones on that doorway upstairs." Harry felt an odd pull toward the orb, not like a compulsion, but like the memory of a name he couldn't quite recall. He glanced at Hermione. "Do you think it's connected to the page?" "Almost certainly," she said, though her tone held more wonder than certainty. The orb flickered suddenly, and the glow deepened to a warm gold. Inside, a shadow swirled, faint at first, but growing more distinct, a scene forming in miniature. It looked like a fragment of the castle, but not as it was now. The walls newer, the stone a lighter shade, the torches fewer. Figures moved in and out of view, robed, purposeful, their faces turned away, as though the orb kept their identities veiled. Hermione whispered, "It's showing us the past." Ron peered closer, his voice hushed. "But why? And why us?" The image wavered, then sharpened again. A figure approached in the vision, tall, robed, carrying a book bound in something dark and glistening. The figure stopped before a younger version of the misted doorway they had just discovered, lifted a hand, and pressed it to the runes. The mist parted, and the figure stepped inside. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the glow faded, the shadow dissolved, and the orb lay still once more. Hermione straightened, her expression unreadable. "It's a memory, but not one we can find in the Pensieve. It's stored here in this object, which means it's meant to be seen, but only in fragments." Harry withdrew the shimmering page from his robes. The moment it came into view, the orb's glow returned, softer this time, and the symbols on the page shifted, aligning themselves into a pattern that matched the runes carved into the orb's surface. The connection was clear, yet incomplete, like a puzzle with just enough pieces in place to hint at the image, but not enough to see the whole. They stood there for a long moment, letting the quiet fill in the spaces between their thoughts. Somewhere far above, the castle's night sounds continued, wind brushing the turrets, the faint creak of settling beams, the low murmur of a portrait shifting in its frame. "We're in the middle of something," Hermione said at last, "but the castle isn't giving us everything at once. It's pacing us." Harry nodded. He felt no rush to solve it. Not tonight. Whatever this was, it had waited this long. It could wait a little longer. And so, with the orb's glow still lingering faintly in the corner of their vision, they stepped back into the corridor, the air cool and calm around them, the gentle suspense trailing after them like the whisper of a page yet to be turned. A soft murmur seeped through the mist, not words exactly, but the gentle cadence of speech, like someone speaking from the far end of a dream. It was almost hypnotic, drawing them forward without force, like the tug of a current beneath still waters. Harry took a step closer, and the mist parted just enough for him to glimpse the faint silhouette of shelves beyond, tall, crowded, and glowing faintly with their own inner light. But between the shelves, something moved. Not a person, not entirely. Its outline wavered like smoke, yet its form suggested a robed figure gliding soundlessly from one aisle to another. It turned, and though its face was indistinct, Harry felt the undeniable sensation of being watched, not with suspicion, but with quiet, measured interest, as if the figure had been expecting them for a very long time. The figure lifted a hand, and a page fluttered loose from somewhere deep within the shelves. It drifted toward them, gliding through the mist until it stopped just short of Harry's outstretched fingers. The paper bore no ink, only a faint shimmer, as if the words were waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Hermione's voice was barely more than a breath. This is the second time tonight the castle has shown us something it shouldn't." The mist thickened again, curling upward in soft spirals, and the figure vanished between the shelves. The page remained suspended in the air, its shimmer deepening, almost pulsing in time with their heartbeats. The silence around them was complete, yet not empty. It was the silence of a room holding its breath, waiting to see what they would do next. Harry reached out. The page was cool to the touch, almost weightless, and then, with a faint hum, the shimmering shapes began to form, the letters arranging themselves in a language none of them had ever seen before. Hermione leaned in, eyes wide. "We'll need to figure out what this says." Somewhere beyond the mist, the rustling sound came again, fainter now, but carrying with it the promise that whatever had begun tonight was far from over. The next day arrived in a gentle hush, the soft glow of morning sunlight spilling through the enchanted windows of the Gryffindor common room. It was a light unlike any other, warm yet subdued, as though the castle itself knew that its students needed a slow, peaceful start to their day. Harry stirred in the armchair he had fallen asleep in, the remnants of last night's whispers still echoing faintly in his mind. Ron was slumped across from him, his legs dangling over the armrest, snoring softly, while Hermione was already awake, curled in a corner with a book that looked far older than anything they had found in the library's open shelves. There was no rush to their movements, no urgent summons or clattering footsteps in the corridors, only the calm hum of the castle. The fire in the hearth had burned low during the night, its last embers now glowing faintly in the quiet. Harry stretched slowly, glancing at Hermione. "You're up early," he murmured, his voice hushed as though the walls might overhear. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, her eyes still scanning the page. "Something about last night. It doesn't feel like it's finished." She closed the book gently, the sound of parchment sliding against parchment, soft and deliberate. "I think we should explore, properly this time." Ron groaned, half opening an eye. "Explore?" "We barely slept," he said, though there was no real protest in his tone. Harry caught the faintest glimmer of curiosity in Ron's gaze. Even in the calm of the morning, the pull of the mystery was still there, soft but undeniable. They agreed to begin their search after breakfast, taking the slow path through the castle so they could observe, listen, and feel for anything out of place. The great hall was bathed in the golden light of the enchanted ceiling, a perfect reflection of the morning sky outside. Plates appeared quietly before them, offering warm porridge, buttered toast, and steaming mugs of tea. Everything felt unusually hushed, as though Hogwarts itself was watching and waiting. After breakfast, the three friends wandered the quieter corridors, their footsteps echoing softly against the flagstones. They paused now and then to glance at a shifting tapestry or listen to the faint creak of an unseen staircase moving somewhere in the distance. Every detail felt alive, though not in a threatening way, more like the castle was gently guiding them, nudging them towards something they needed to see. It was Hermione who led them toward the East Wing, a place rarely visited except by students heading to ancient ruins. Here, the light dimmed, the stained glass windows casting long ribbons of colored light across the floor. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air, and the air felt cooler, as though these corridors had been undisturbed for years. Harry trailed his fingers lightly along the wall, feeling faint indentations that might have been runes worn smooth with time. They reached an alcove Harry had never noticed before, a small recess in the wall with a narrow bench beneath a tall, arched window. Outside, the lake shimmered softly, the giant squid's tentacles barely disturbing the surface. Hermione sat, brushing dust from the bench, and unfolded a roll of parchment she had brought along. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "the disappearances we've heard whispers about. They might have started here." Ron leaned against the wall, frowning. "What makes you say that?" "Because this is where the magical currents feel different." She gestured for them to close their eyes. "Listen, not just with your ears, but the way Professor Dumbledore once told us to feel magic." "It hums here," Harry obeyed, letting the quiet wrap around him. There it was, a faint vibration, like the echo of distant music, deep in the bones of the castle. It wasn't unsettling. In fact, it was soothing, as though the air itself carried a gentle lullaby. They lingered there, speaking in low voices about what to do next. Eventually, Hermione suggested they split their exploration into two paths. Ron would retrace their steps from the previous night to check for any subtle changes, while she and Harry would follow this magical current further into the East Wing. It was a calm decision, made without urgency, each agreeing with the ease of friends who trusted one another deeply. As Ron set off, Harry and Hermione moved deeper into the wing, passing portraits of witches and wizards who seemed to be pretending to sleep, their eyes just barely open as the pair walked by. The walls narrowed slightly, and the air became cooler still. They found a hidden archway behind a tapestry depicting a moonlit garden, and stepping through it was like crossing into another layer of the castle's memory. Here, the corridor was lined with bookshelves built into the stone, their contents untouched by time. The spines bore no titles, only faint, swirling patterns in gold and silver. Hermione's eyes lit with curiosity, but she refrained from touching them just yet. They're not part of the regular library," she whispered. "I think this might be a private collection." They moved slowly, taking in every detail, the faint scent of aged parchment, the soft glow from candles floating overhead, the way the shelves seemed to stretch further than the corridor should allow. Harry felt an odd warmth in the center of his chest, as if the castle approved of their presence here. At the end of the corridor, they found a circular room no larger than the Gryffindor common room, with a domed ceiling painted to resemble a star-filled sky. In the center stood a round table, its surface engraved with an intricate map of Hogwarts and its grounds. Tiny points of light pulsed faintly on the map, marking places they recognized, and others they had never seen before. Hermione leaned closer, tracing a fingertip over one of the unfamiliar glowing spots. This could be it, the link between the disappearances and the castle. These lights, they're showing places that have faded from common knowledge, forgotten rooms, hidden paths. They didn't rush to act on the discovery. Instead, they simply stood there, letting the soft light of the enchanted map wash over them, both knowing that this was only the beginning of what they would uncover. For now, it was enough to have found this place, to have shared this quiet moment of connection with the castle, with the mystery, and with each other. When they finally left, the map's lights dimmed, the stars on the ceiling shifting gently as if to bid them farewell. Harry and Hermione stepped back into the corridor, their steps unhurried, the lingering sense of calm carrying them forward into whatever came next. The moonlight filtering through the high windows of the library seemed softer now, as though it knew the long-held mystery was finally ready to speak. Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood together in the restricted section, surrounded by towering shelves heavy with the scent of old parchment and the quiet hum of lingering enchantments. Hermione held the book they had discovered earlier that night, the one bound in deep blue leather, its cover etched with faint silver runes that shifted like ripples on water. She had opened it only halfway, not yet daring to reveal its final page, as though the truth within might somehow vanish if exposed too quickly. "Go on, Hermione," Ron murmured, his voice low, though there was no one else around. "We've come this far. Might as well see what all the whispering was about." Hermione's eyes met Harry's, seeking reassurance. He gave a slight nod, his expression calm but intent. With steady fingers, she turned the last page. The runes glowed brighter, rearranging themselves into lines of delicate, handwritten script. The words floated above the parchment for a moment before settling into place. It was not a curse nor a dangerous incantation, but a story, one written centuries ago by a student named Isolde Ainsworth, who spoke of a single night when several students had simply vanished. The date matched the whispers they had heard earlier from the paintings in the hallway. It was the same night the moon had turned silver blue and the castle's magic had shifted in ways no one could explain. Harry leaned closer, reading over Hermione's shoulder. The account described a hidden room beneath the restricted section, sealed by spells that only revealed themselves once every 100 years. On that night, curious students had been lured by strange lights and soft voices, following them into the hidden passage. They had never returned, but Isolde insisted they had not died. Instead, she claimed they had been taken somewhere, where time folded gently upon itself. A place beyond Hogwarts, yet somehow part of it. As they read on, the parchment seemed to respond, soft motes of silver light drifting upward and forming images. A round archway made of black stone, a quiet corridor lined with dual windows, showing a starlit sky that was not their own, and a great door carved with patterns that shimmered like water. It was more vision than memory, but the feeling it carried was unmistakable. This was the place the vanished students had gone. Hermione closed the book softly, almost reverently. "It's not just a legend," she whispered. "It's an invitation." Ron looked doubtful, but intrigued. Invitation or trap, more like. Either way, we're the ones who found it this time. Harry said nothing at first, his eyes drifting to the far end of the library. For just an instant, he thought he saw the faint outline of an archway between the shelves and a soft silver light spilling from it. They exchanged a glance, and in that silent moment, all three knew. They were already part of this mystery, and whatever waited beyond that arch had been waiting for them too. The air felt warmer, almost expectant, as though Hogwarts itself was holding its breath. The night was far from over. The silver glow from the hidden archway faded gradually, as though it had never been there at all, leaving only the steady flicker of candlelight along the library's stone walls. Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood quietly in the lingering hush, the air still tinged with the faint trace of that strange, otherworldly warmth. Hermione slipped the blue leather book back into its place on the shelf, her fingers lingering for a moment on the spine before she let go. The runes no longer shifted. They lay dormant now, as if content that their story had been read. "I think," she said softly, "we were meant to find this, but not to follow. Not yet." Her voice carried no disappointment, only a gentle acceptance, as though the mystery itself had whispered patience into her ear. Ron stretched his shoulders, glancing around the towering shelves. "I'll admit, I'm not upset we didn't step through that arch. I've had enough of disappearing staircases and strange doors for one lifetime." Yet his tone was lighter than before, the earlier tension replaced by a subtle curiosity that he couldn't quite hide. Harry's gaze wandered to the far end of the library, where the moonlight painted silver shapes across the floor. The vision of the arch still lingered in his mind, not as an unanswered question gnawing at him, but as a promise left in trust. The ghosts who had guarded the restricted section, the strange whispers in the air, even the shifting runes, all of it felt less like a warning now, and more like a gift waiting for the right moment. The three of them moved slowly toward the main aisle, their footsteps muffled on the worn rugs. As they passed the old wooden tables, Harry noticed the ghostly librarian near the far corner, her translucent hands arranging books with quiet precision. She didn't look up, but there was a faint smile on her face, as though she knew exactly what they had seen and had approved of their choice to walk away, for now. Back in the common room, the fire had burned low, casting a warm amber glow across the walls. Crookshanks was curled into a deep sleep on the armchair, his slow breathing filling the silence with a small, steady rhythm. They each sank into their seats, letting the familiar comfort of home wrap around them like a thick blanket. For a long while, no one spoke. The weight of the night's discovery rested on them not as a burden, but as something precious, a secret shared only between the three of them and perhaps the castle itself. The restricted section would still be there tomorrow and the day after, and long after they had left Hogwarts. The archway and its hidden path would wait, patient as stone. Hermione finally broke the silence with a quiet sigh. Some knowledge isn't meant to be taken all at once. Sometimes the story is more important than the ending. She glanced at Harry and Ron, her eyes warm, and I think this is one of those times. Harry nodded slowly, leaning bolt against the cushions. Outside the windows, the night sky was clear, each star shining in its own gentle way. He felt no rush to solve the mystery, no need to chase it into the dark. The truth, whatever it was, would come when it was ready. In the stillness, the castle seemed to hum softly around them, the old stones breathing in time with their own calm hearts. Somewhere far below, the ghosts of the restricted section kept their silent vigil, guarding the doorway between what was known and what was yet to be. And in that moment, wrapped in the quiet comfort of the common room, they understood that sometimes the greatest magic was not in what was found, but in what was allowed to wait. The fire in the common room had burned down to glowing embers, their soft light painting the walls in shades of amber and gold. Harry, Hermione, and Ron sat together in a quiet circle, the weight of the night's mystery now settled into something gentle, not a burden, but a comfort. Outside, the moon drifted behind a veil of thin clouds, casting a calm silver glow through the high windows. Hermione closed her eyes for a moment, her voice warm when she spoke. "You know, I think we'll carry this night with us for a long time. Not because we solved anything, but because we didn't need to." She smiled faintly, as if speaking to herself as much as to her friends. Ron gave a small chuckle, leaning back in his chair. "For once, I'm happy not knowing everything. Feels nice, actually, like the castle still has its own secrets, even from us." Harry glanced into the embers, their slow, steady glow reminding him of the way the archway had shimmered. Somewhere in the depths of the restricted section, the ghosts would still be keeping watch, the strange blue book resting quietly on its shelf, and the runes waiting patiently for the right moment to stir again. The thought brought him a sense of deep reassurance, like knowing an old friend was always nearby, even if unseen. A faint breeze whispered through the open window, carrying with it the scent of the night, cool stone, distant trees, and the faint trace of wood smoke from Hogsmeade. The castle seemed to breathe with them, its ancient walls holding them close. In that peaceful moment, they each felt it, the quiet promise that not all answers but it had to be rushed, that some magic was meant to be savored slowly. The restricted section would wait, the secrets would wait, and until that day came, they were exactly where they needed to be. One by one, they rose, bidding each other good night. The stairs creaked softly under their steps, but the warmth of the common room lingered with them as they climbed. And as sleep finally found them in the safety of their beds, Hogwarts watched over them, a guardian of both knowledge and dreams, holding its mysteries in patient trust until the time was right to share them again.